Hello to everyone out there joining the Plan for Your Land series for 2022. My name is Amanda Bintliff, and I am the Watershed Restoration Specialist for the North Santiam Watershed Council. Our mission for the council. So why are we seeing an increase in large wildfires? Fire suppression combined with warmer, drier temperatures are creating conditions that make our forests and our communities more vulnerable to large and increasingly intense megafires. The primary characteristic of forests that are prone to these megafires is the overabundance of forest fuels. For most of the 20th century, the U.S. federal fire policy was guided by the strategy of fire suppression, which is designed to protect watersheds, communities, and commercial timber supplies. While well-intentioned, people did not understand that the forests have evolved to burn. Periodic brief fires strip away undergrowth and help new trees to sprout, actually keeping these forests healthy. Between lightning strikes and indigenous burns, most of the landscapes in North America were shaped by fire, and many landscapes need it. Without moderate to low intensity burns to clear fuel, landscapes became prime for more destructive wildfires. Reducing the overall fuels can disrupt the vertical and horizontal continuity and starve potential wildfires of combustible fuels and reduce their intensity. So what are fuels then? Fuel is a combustible biomass found in forests. It can include needles, grasses, small twigs, shrubs, branches on the ground, down trees, logs, etc. Fuels can be either living or dead, and homes and other structures are considered forms of fuels. Basically, anything that burns can be considered a fuel. Before the arrival of settlers in the later half of the 19th century and the logging and fire suppression practices that followed, fires in the western U.S. conifer forests were the result of lightning strikes in the summer storms and burning by Native American tribes, who often used fire, among other things, to maintain and enhance food sources such as berries and acorns, as well as to improve hunting areas for deer and elk by increasing the fire-following vegetation in which they fed. Despite a widespread popular belief that there is now an unnatural excess of wildland fire, the landscape burned far more often prior to the arrival of settlers. Now there is abundant evidence that historical forests were highly variable in their density and successional stages. The post-fire environment is rich in patches of native flowering shrubs that replenish the soil with nitrogen and attract a diversity of beneficial insects that aid in pollination after the fire. Small mammals find excellent habitat in the shrubs and down logs, providing food for foraging spotted owls. Deer and elk browse on the post-fire shrubs and natural conifer regeneration. Bears eat and disperse berries and conifer seeds, often found in substantial quantities after the fire. And even morel mushrooms spring from the ashes in the most severely parts of forest burns. Wildfires are a naturally occurring part of forest ecosystems and help to retain forest health. This happens because when a wildfire comes through, it exposes mineral-rich soils and recycles plant nutrients back into the soil. It reduces unnaturally high accumulations of vegetation and controls many invasive plant species, plant diseases, and pest insects. Fire gives plants that have evolved with it a competitive edge in promoting the growth of native trees, wildflowers, and other plants, whereas fire suppression can favor weeds and non-native plant species. An example of this is purple loosestrife, which is an extremely aggressive invasive species that often takes over wetlands. Native waterfowl and wildlife species can suffer from the loss of food sources such as cattail and arrowhead that purple loosestrife has replaced. There are many benefits to reducing forest fuels. Restoring fire to the landscape and simulating natural processes helps to promote fire-resistant forests at a landscape level, reducing the intensity and severity of wildfires for when they do occur. And it also helps to lessen the potential loss of life and property and increases firefighter safety and aid in effective wildfire response. There are two main types of fuel reduction methods. Mechanical fuel removal methods include thinning, mowing, and pruning of lower tree branches. Second method is prescribed fire, which is used to reduce surface fuels, usually after a site has been treated mechanically. Prescribed burning, especially underburning, is risky and has a high potential for liability. A professionally developed burn plan is a must, and professional contract burners are recommended. Please contact your state fire control agency in advance to discuss your plans to burn and obtain necessary permits. Research has shown that a combination of treatments works best to achieve these goals in reducing the intensity of future wildfires. The effectiveness of these treatments depends on how closely the principles of fuel reductions are carried out and the maintenance of treatments over time. Reducing the overall amount of fuels and disrupting the vertical and horizontal continuity will starve potential wildfires of combustible fuels and reduce their intensity. As discussed in the previous slide, the principles for reducing forest fuels starts with reducing surface fuels. This can be done by thinning and also mechanical methods, which were just discussed. This works to limit fuel continuity by increasing the height to the base of the tree crowns and increasing spacing between tree crowns, which you can kind of see in this image to the left here at the top. The trees are well spaced, and the height to the base of the tree crowns is also increased. You'll want to account for topography, and when planting or choosing which trees to keep on the landscape, you want to choose fire-resistant native plants and keep larger fire-resistant tree species on the landscape. Moreover, you'll also want to maintain practice of proper tree care and stand management. So this image kind of shows the before and after. In that to the left, you can tell before there's high density between trees of different stands. There's a lot of fuels on the ground, just generally overgrown. In the after, you can tell that surface fuels have been removed, the density has been decreased. They've kept wildlife, logs, and habitat trees, but they've removed the dangerous trees and they've pruned low branches to really demonstrate what a healthy forest should look like. Now, here's a very similar image, but in a real-life example. So the top photo shows the landscape before fuel treatments were done. As you can tell, the forest is very dense. You can't see what's behind the forest, and there's a lot of fuel continuity here. You could definitely see if a fire started in one corner, it would have enough fuels to continue throughout the forest. Whereas the picture on the bottom shows after forest fuel treatments have been completed. You can tell that the trees are well spaced. You can see through the forest, the landscape there really shows the difference in the amount of density. The surface fuels have been piled, and it's just generally a really great example of what a well-thinned forest should look like. So far we've talked about reducing forest fuels on your property, but now we're really going to focus on discussing different methods that you can use to help protect your home from destruction during a wildfire event. The home in the previous photo was a result of landowners implementing FireWise methods. FireWise is a framework used to help residents get organized, find direction, and to take action towards increasing the ignition resistance of their homes and their communities. The goal of this program is to prevent the destruction of homes during a wildfire event. The program is based in science and along the following principles: that fire does not engulf everything in its path. It only advances to locations that meet requirements of combustion. And by altering the type, size, quantity, and spacing of vegetation and other fuels, we can reduce the likelihood of that combustion. So in order to prevent this kind of combustion, we need to talk about how fire behavior threatens your home. While there are many things that you can do to protect your home from wildfire, these critical actions are essential to making a meaningful reduction in your risk. Research around home destruction versus home survival in wildfire often points to embers and small flames as the main cause of homes catching fire. Embers are burning pieces of airborne wood or vegetation that can be carried more than a mile through wind, causing spot fires and igniting homes and debris. So FireWise came up with a term called the Home Ignition Zone, or HIZ. In order to increase your home's chance of surviving a wildfire, you need to choose fire-resistant building materials and limit the amount of flammable vegetation in the 3 home ignition zones. The HIZ is divided into 3 zones: the immediate zone, which is 0 to 5 feet around the house, the intermediate zone, which is 5 to 30 feet, and the extended zone, which is 30 to 100 feet. We will discuss this further in the next slide. So the immediate zone, which is the home and the area between 0 and 5 feet from the furthest attached exterior point of the home, is defined as a non-combustible area. This is the most important zone to take immediate action on, as it is the most vulnerable to embers. Start with the house itself. Clean roofs and gutters of dead leaves and debris. Dead leaves and debris and pine needles could catch those embers that we just talked about, and having non-flammable roofing materials such as metal or asphalt shingles can greatly reduce the potential for your home to ignite. Replacing and repairing any loose or missing shingles on roof tiles, cleaning debris in the exterior attic vents, and installing a 1/8 inch metal mesh screening to those vents. Repairing and replacing any damaged or loose window screens, moving any flammable material away from wall exteriors. This includes mulch, flammable plants, needles, leaves, firewood piles, anything that can burn really. And lastly, removing anything stored underneath decks or porches. You'll want to move that away from the wall's exteriors. So now we're going to look at this as an example of a poorly maintained landscape versus a well-maintained landscape. The top image, you can see that there's a lot of shrubs that are continuous, and they're touching the tree branches, and the tree is overhanging the roof and the chimney, and the shrubs are against the house. These are all a bunch of things that you do not want to do, as they increase your risk. Whereas the well-maintained landscape has shrubs in distinct groups, there's low ground cover or gravel beds, the spacing between shrubs and trees have been increased, that solitary tree has been pruned up away from the house, and the shrubs next to the house have been removed. This one on the bottom is what you want your property to look like in order for you to reduce your risk. So next is the intermediate zone, which is 5 to 30 feet from the furthest exterior point of the home, which is shown in the circle below that is orange. This is where landscaping and hardscaping can really be helpful for creating fuel breaks. You'll want to clear vegetation from underneath any stationary propane tanks and create fuel breaks with driveways, walkways, patios, and decks. Lawns and native grasses should be mowed to a height of 4 inches, and removing any ladder fuels or vegetation under trees will be important. As for trees, you'll want to prune them up to 6 to 10 feet from the ground, and you'll have to space them out with a minimum of 18 feet between crowns, with the distance increasing with the percentage of slope. Tree placement should be planned to ensure that the mature canopy is no closer than 10 feet to the edge of a structure. Trees and shrubs in this zone should be limited to small clusters to help break up the continuity of fuels. So the last zone is the extended zone, which is anywhere from 30 to 200 feet from the furthest exterior point of the house. The goal with landscaping here is not to eliminate fire, but to interrupt the fire's path and to keep flames small and on the ground. This can be done by removing dead plant and tree material, small conifers growing between mature trees, and any vegetation that's growing adjacent to storage sheds or outbuildings within this area. You'll want to dispose of any heavy accumulations of ground litter and debris. And trees that are 30 to 60 feet from the home should have at least 12 feet between canopy tops, whereas trees that are 60 to 100 feet from the home should have at least 6 feet between canopy tops. If you need help to assess your wildfire risk or putting together a plan and implementing these fuel reduction methods, you can get assistance from the Oregon Department of Forestry, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, the Forest Service, even your local fire department can help. And lastly, Oregon State University's Extension Fire Program are all here to assist you.